children are malnourished, and we have a declining sex ratio, which means the proportion of girl children is lower than the proportion of boys, which means biologically it's not possible, because in any given population you would have more girls than boys. But it reflects a trend of increasing sex selection, which is of infant feticide or sex selective abortions, which is leading to a declining sex ratio, particularly in the urban areas between 1991 and 2001. Annual food grain production, when I say it's stagnating, okay, we're doing well on an overall level. Every year we produce more food grains than the previous year, we've set records. But on an average, the per capita annual food grain production has remained stagnant. The availability of food grains has actually gone down. And it's at a level that is much lower in 2010 than it was, say, in the 1990s. And you will notice here a very steep decline in 1997. A very steep decline. A decline that we have just about managed to arrest in 2001. But something that has not really gone up to the level of 1997. And the reason for that decline is very simple. Right until 1997, we had a universal public distribution system where the state was guaranteeing food grains to every citizen of the country. Beginning with 1997, we made it a targeted system. And given the political economy of our societies, and here I can say our, because in many ways we are also very similar countries, the political economy of our societies ensures that any scheme that you have for the poor or for the very poor remains a very poor scheme. If you have services which are accessed only by the poor, you can be sure that whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Nepal, whether it's Bangladesh, it will remain a very poor service because of targeting. And this is the story in India. You can see the decline from 1997 onwards. On the other hand, if you look at how much food grains Government of India is hoarding, the yellow bit is now this is the buffer stock picture for all of India. Every country, most countries try and keep a buffer in strategic norms, that is, government tries to keep some food grains with itself, just in case there's a famine or we go to war or there's a major pest attack. And this food grain is seen as a strategic or a buffer norm. Now in India, the strategic norm is about 22 to 24 million metric tons, which means at any point in time in the godowns, India should have about 20 to 24 million metric tons. The black line that you see is the buffer norm through the years, the black line that runs through the center of this graph. The orange bit is how much rice we have stored, which is little below the buffer norm. And the green is how much stock we have in wheat. Now, the situation is actually much worse now. Today, for the last 5-7 years on average, India is holding anywhere between 50 to 66 million metric tons of food grains, which is 3 times the buffer norms. 3 times the buffer norms. Which means we are keeping food grains 3 times more than what is required of us to keep in our granaries. And we are not able to keep that very well. As in our case, we have reflected, and those of you from India are very familiar, that in the Supreme Court we have taken the issue of rotting food grains, and we have raised this issue consistently on why food grains are rotting and how government is not able to take care of these food grains. We are compelled to export the food grains because they are rotting. And yet we keep 60 to 70 million tons of food grains in our godowns. And if you ask me how much 60 million metric tons is, it's a lot of food grains. So my friend, the very eminent economist Jean Drèze, when we started the Right to Food case, when we asked him to, when colleagues in the Right to Food campaign asked him to tell them in real terms how much 60 million tons of food grains was, which was the holding of the Food Corporation of India in 2001, when People's Union for Civil Liberties filed the Right to Food case, Jean calculated that if you lined up one sack next to the other, and you lined up 60 million tons of food grains, you can go to the moon and come back halfway around. That is the amount of food grains that the Indian state was holding and is holding. Actually, the stocks you're holding now has gone up. So, friends, this is a great enigma. This is a paradox of our times. That in a country where 30% of adults are malnourished, in a country where 46% of children are malnourished, in a country where which carries the burden of global malnutrition of 25% of almost a quarter of all the world's children who are malnourished are in India. This is the stock position that you have. This is the kind of storage that India is keeping in its go down. And you look at the difference here, which looks slightly updated to 2012, 13. Look at the buffer norm, which is below the black line, and the pink line, which tells you what are the actual stocks in our go down. On the other hand, we have seen the highest rate of food grain inflation in 35 years, the highest rate of food inflation in 35 years, not just food grains but other foodstuffs mainly. In 35 years, we've never had the kind of food inflation that we've had. And if you look between 1999 and 2012, you look at the wholesale price index, just look at the steep rise. Of course, 2008, the rise is very steep in 8-9 because it corresponds also to the food price volatility globally. All countries were hit. You will recall friends from Bangladesh, that Bangladesh was also very badly affected in 2008. And in particular, it was worse affected because as a knee-jerk reaction to the global food price volatility, India cut down exports of buro rice to Bangladesh, where a large part of the buro rice deficit was being met by India, and rice prices in Bangladesh really spiraled high. So if you look at the food price index, it's going up. If you look at what is the per capita monthly consumption in, say, a country like Vietnam, and compare that with India. I thought there might be some colleagues in Southeast Asia, so I thought I must take an example. So I've taken one from Vietnam. I don't have the updated data on Vietnam, but it hasn't changed much in the years. On every indicator except dairy, except milk products, the Vietnamese are consuming more. I don't even want to show you the figures of China or Brazil or Bangladesh. Well, I must. Okay, let me show you now that they're here. But if you look at the figures, compare India with China, compare it with the US, or compare it with the rest of the world, look at the kind of consumption that's happening. So it's not surprising, friends, that we have the situation that we have in India of hunger and starvation. And technically, as I said, that there should be no food insecurity. In India, both GDP and food grain production have risen faster than the growth in population over the last 50 years. And yet chronic hunger and starvation persists in large sections of the population. And there has been, as I have been telling you, a declining calorie consumption in the bottom 30% of the population. Ironically, India also has some of the largest food schemes in the world. You have today, after the PUCL case, after the Right to Food case, we can say that we have some of the largest food schemes in the world because many of these food schemes were universalized by the orders of the Supreme Court. And I'll come to that. I'll come to the legal aspects of the case in a bit. You have the Integrated Child Development Services, which is the only institutional mechanism that the government has to cover children under 6. This covers, at least in principle, 160 million children across the country under the age of 6. In practice, it's about 90 to 100 million children across the country. You have the midday meal scheme, which provides for a free lunch to every child in every school, which is government or government-aided primary school. And the midday meal scheme reaches about 140 million children today in this country. 14 crore children will have their lunch today as you have your lunch today. Today might be a holiday, so many kids will go hungry. But on an average day, about 14 crore children in India have a lunch. And this is another program along with the ICDS which is universalized by the Supreme Court. We have a public distribution system that today reaches close to 50% of the population. Close to 50%, of which 36% is paid for by the central government and the rest is paid for by state governments. For destitute poor, we have free feeding programs. We have the landmark National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which guarantees 100 days of employment at minimum wages for every rural household in the country. We have social safety net programs like monthly pensions, national family benefit schemes. So we have and we even have a program called NFBS, which gives a compensation in case of the principal breadwinner to the family. So you have ICDS, which begins with a scheme which begins with pregnant mothers. So the child is being fed in the womb from a meal that pregnant mothers receive from the government. And you have a scheme where compensation is paid when somebody dies. So literally from the womb to the tomb or to the cradle to the grave, we have one scheme or the other that covers people. And this welfare architecture didn't come in a day. It was created over the last 65 years. It's nowhere close to the welfare architecture, say, in Western Europe or in Scandinavia or in many parts of the developing world. It is not even close to what we have today in, say, Latin America, in Brazil, part of the world that I really love and I visit very often. There has been a great transformation in Latin America, in many countries in Latin America. So if you leave aside these few pockets, Western Europe, some parts of Eastern Europe, Canada, parts of North America, parts of Central America and Latin America, India is still doing better in terms of its welfare architecture. And yet we have huge issues in falling per capita crop, particularly food production in the last 10 years per capita. We have increasing inequality with only marginal increase in the per capita expenditure of the bottom 30%. And we have a planning commission which sets a minimum poverty line, which defines poverty in a way which allows it to, all planning commissions do this, the planning commission in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, everybody has a poverty line. The Indian poverty line is particularly notorious because it defines the poor at a very low extent, and I think I have a graph on that which will show you how things are. And we have a situation where poor have low access to foods like pulses, vegetables, oils. Major food related programs are plagued with leakages. We are not doing enough on agricultural reforms. There is a huge agrarian distress in this country. India has seen the largest wave of farmer suicides anywhere in recorded history. Between 1996 and 2012, more than 250,000 farmers have committed suicide in India. 250,000 farmers have committed suicide in India. 250,000 farmers, which means that in the 2 hours that I'm going to spend with you, talking to you or discussing issues with you, 8 farmers would have committed suicide somewhere in the country. In these 4 hours that we are in this room together, in 2 hours that we are in this room together. We are not addressing structural issues like land. On the contrary,